Some of us have gone with organized tours, some of us on our own, and many on both. We panelists will illustrate our presentations with photos, most taken on our own trips. We will also suggest other modern resources that might be helpful in conducting your own ancestral search, like cell phone and internet maps, and online reservation sites for hotels and other lodging. Much of this information is based on our own genealogies and family stories, plus church records and grave markers, as well as government and other records. We've traipsed through fields searching for signs of our ancestors, and occasionally found evidence we've been looking for. We will also talk about some of the families in our family trees and show some villages of origin. Familiar Moundridge names include Crabels, Schroggs, Zergers, Galleys, as well as Kaufmans, Gravers, Gearings, and Stuckies. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists. Our first presenters, Eugene Goering and Waneta both Goering, will focus on our ancestors in Switzerland. These ancestors lived initially near Zurich and in the Emma Valley, Emmental, in Canton Bern, as early as 15 and 1600s. Waneta and Eugene went on a Mennonite heritage tour in 2002. Also, Eugene has served on the steering committee for this 150th anniversary celebration in Moundridge. Second, I, Paticia Goering Smioth, will speak about emigrations, primarily in the 16 and 1700s, to the Palatinate in today's Germany, also known as Rhineland-Pfalz, and to the Alsace in the northeastern portion of today's France. Here many of our ancestors became Amish. I participated in Mennonite heritage tours in 2006 and 2013. Our third presenter is Jerry Juhnke. He will share his experiences in modern-day Montbeliard, France. Jerry will talk about a number of connections he made during visits to the region with his wife Didi, highlighting experiences with the Montbeliard Mennonite Church. Jerry is also coordinator of the Mennonite genealogy group for Swiss Bohemian Mennonites in Kansas. They're having a hard time hearing, you say? Okay. Our fourth presenter, Wayne Goering, will talk about emigrations from Western Europe and today's Poland. He will focus on two villages in the southeastern Poland, Ursulen and Mikkelsdorf, where our ancestors settled around 1795. Wayne and his wife, Danny, were on an early Mennonite tour to the Ukraine in 1995. Both have been very involved in organizing this 150th weekend. Danny, or Daniil, is the overall coordinator for this event, and Wayne has, this is wrong picture, here we are with Wayne and Danny. And Wayne has contributed his technical skills to make everything run smoothly. Our final speaker, Kathy Goering, will talk about villages in Bohemia in today's Ukraine, the last step for our ancestors before immigrating to Moundridge. Kathy and her daughter, Leslie Seiter, were part of the 2013 tour to Mennonite areas in Western and Eastern Europe. Kathy has also served on the steering committee for the 150th anniversary event and has been in charge of publicity. We hope that our presentations today give you an idea about the areas where our ancestors have come from and their journeys. And if you're interested, we hope you can use our presentations as a starting point for planning your own journeys. Now Waneta and Eugene Goering will talk about our ancestral roots in Switzerland.
Traveling in Switzerland on the Mennonite Heritage Tour.
You'll have to talk louder.
Traveling in Switzerland on the Mennonite Heritage Tour in September, October 2002. Our group was 43 plus, and our leader was Dr. John Ruth from Pennsylvania. He's a person who knows the Swiss. He's written books, and many books. And the map referenced here is Switzerland there in the middle, and the next map is the area where the Mennonites lived. Traveling through the Jura Mountains, we crossed the French-Swiss border in late afternoon on our way to Bern. Arriving in the Emmental Valley, we passed the village of Ward, where in 1693 the split in the Amish took place over the issue of shunning between Ammon and Hans Reist. They were never able to reconcile their differences, and Hans Reist was eventually expelled from the community. For many Amish, the persecution became intolerable, and by 1711, they had already made the move to Pennsylvania in America. The Anabaptists lived in the lush Emmental Valley, and in the beautiful scenery of this valley, the Cradle Hill was pointed out. And nestled within the hills surrounding the valley, there were many small villages and farms which held great significance for the Cradles, the Goerings, Kaufmans, Longeneckers, Baumgartners, and many others. In this valley were the villages of Langnau, Zazaville, and Eggeville. Eggeville being the epicenter of the Anabaptist movement, where most of the authorities found difficult to root out the rebaptizers. Arriving in Bern, John Ruth provided a little history about the Anabaptists in Bern. When Napoleon took over Bern, some of the Anabaptists...
This thing is not advancing. Where's the way?
Yeah.
It's not advancing.
I'm getting a red light.
That's the laser. You're on the wrong button.
I'm on the...
One button up.
We're going to go back.
There, that's burned.
Okay, yeah. Arriving in Bern, John Ruth provided a little history about the Anabaptists in Bern. When Napoleon took over Bern, some of the Anabaptists gave up their pacifist beliefs. On our walk through Bern, we viewed the places where several of our forebears were imprisoned for following their beliefs. Continuing through the narrow streets, our guide pointed to the place in the Rhine River where many were chained and loaded onto boats, forced to leave their homes and families. And because of the severe persecution, some Anabaptists moved to the Alsace and Palatinate, where they were offered some degree of religious freedom. Now in the Swiss Alps, traveling on to Lucerne, we were treated to an unexpected sight. Farmers were bringing a parade of cows adorned with beautiful floral wreaths around their horns and large ringing cowbells hanging from their necks, announcing their return from the hills for the winter.
Talk louder.
Even a large hot pink bus didn't startle the docile animals. We are now in Zurich, where Conrad Grebel, Felix Manz, and Blaurock began the Reformation. Our guide pointed to the site of the first baptism by Grebel, the Conrad Grebel home, the Zwingli statue, and the place on the river where Felix Manz was drowned. Many martyrs met their deaths in Zurich, one being Jacob Hutter, confined in this tower, and next morning burned at the stake in front of this building. On the University of Zurich campus, John Ruth, our guide, showed us the 95 theses which were nailed to the church door and pointed to the exact place of the debates. Colored drawings in Conrad Grebel's book show the government and Catholic Church authorities and Martin Luther debating the theses. Also visited was the Zurich Central Library, where the only known book from Conrad Grebel's library is located, inscribed with his poem and signature at the front of the book. Also displayed was a 1545 Rush Hour Bible, which is the most often used Bible in Anabaptist circles. The Hutterian New Testament and Anabaptist Chronicles, handwritten by Bullinger, Zwingli's right-hand person. And there was a special visit to the Grossmünster, a huge, impressive edifice. It is said to be built by Charlemagne on the site of the beheading of the Theban missionaries. He declared it to be hallowed ground. Imposed by the lords of Zurich, only poor people paid taxes. The tax burden was causing financial troubles for all farmers. The poor were dissatisfied with the situation, they revolted, and even though the Anabaptists were nonviolent in their protests, the authorities arrested them anyway. The authorities confined them in a prison tower in Troxelwald Castle with a 6x6 heavy wooden box in which to sleep. It must have been very cold for these prisoners of conscience. This was their view from the tower. From there, they were taken to the hall where claims and mandates were issued against them, and then taken down to the river Aare to be sent up the Rhine River to Holland, forbidding them to return to their homes and families. Some did come back, only to be arrested again and sent back. It was raining when we left Zurich. The beautiful countryside was lush green and nicely groomed. We are on our way to the cave where the Anabaptists worshipped in secret. Within a short time, the bus came to a stop at an unassuming place on a narrow, muddy path. It was a dreary day, rain coming down, and to the right, a small stream of water coming down the steep hillside dense with trees. As we climbed the treacherous, slick, muddy path up the hill, many of the small trees were used to grab onto as we traversed our way up to the cave. A couple of the tour group members rescued someone who would have slipped down to the stream below. We could not see the cave on our way up the hill, and this must have been the Anabaptist reason for choosing this location. As we ascended the hill, the cave came into view. A plaque was mounted to the rock at the entrance, identifying the capacity of the cave to be 300 people. When all of us reached the cave and gathered around each other, the water from the hill above the cave was cascading over the front of the cave. What a scene! We felt like we were experiencing the same kind of tension the worshipers must have felt having to meet in secret. Once in the cave, we were led by John and Roma in scripture and singing of the hymn, "What is this place where we are meeting?" Reflecting back 500 years ago, the Anabaptist singing and worship must have been drowned out to the outside world by the rushing water over the front of the cave as it was for us. The authorities were always on the lookout for the rebaptizers. We imagined that this is what it must have been like for them, risking their lives to be able to worship and sing to God in secret. It was costly discipleship. It was a very emotional experience. We then continued on to Innsbruck, Austria.
Where did I come from? As long as I can remember, I've been searching for my roots, my places, my connections. I got an early taste of foreign travel in 1964 when I spent the summer in Europe with KU's Summer Language Institute to Germany. This trip included a Rhine River cruise and a visit to an area near the Rhine where Mennonites had lived. However, I wasn't aware of these connections to my roots, to my heritage at the time. I learned about some much later while researching my Mennonite roots, and about others even later while touring with the Mound Ridge Heritage Group in 2013. In my presentation today, I will focus on early Mennonite migrations from Switzerland to the Palatinate in today's Germany and to the Alsace in today's France. These migrations began in the early 1600s and continued for several centuries. This chart of Swiss-Bohemian Mennonite migrations from Martin H. Schrag's book show these two major routes from Switzerland to the Palatinate or Rhineland Pfalz on the right and to the Alsace on the left. Fleeing to avoid persecutions and even death in Switzerland, these emigrants arrived in the Palatinate mainly on foot. At that time, the region was experiencing famine and was depopulated after the 30 Years' War, which lasted from 1618 to 1648. Looking at the Palatinate more generally, the most important feature, as well as the most important tourist attraction, is the Rhine River, seen here from above. Our 2013 group cruised up the Rhine on the Cologne-Düsseldorf line. We viewed castles, churches, historical monuments, vineyards, and picturesque villages. Our group disembarked at Beaupart, a popular tourist area along the Rhine. The geography of the Palatinate is interesting. Here you can see the winding intersecting roads near the Rhine. The Palatinate is the most productive wine-growing region in Germany, and wine tasting and wine festivals are common in the area. Farmers grow crops both on the hillsides and in the flat areas. Our 2013 group visited Primmerhof, an early Mennonite homestead in the area, owned by the Krayenbull, later Krabel family. In 1671, Jost Krabel fled Satziwell, Switzerland, and settled in the Palatinate. Many years later, he managed to acquire Primmerhof. Magdalena, his wife, was buried in nearby Weierhof. We had a chance to talk with Heinrich Krabel, the last Krabel relative to live at the Primmerhof. We group members in this photo from the 2013 trip all have Krabel relatives. A directional sign points to Krabel Street and to the left, and to the Mennonite Community Church and Cemetery to the right. Weierhof, the center for Mennonites in the Palatinate, also included a community center, gardens, and agricultural buildings. These interior shots of Weierhof Church show our tour leader, Gary Waltner, as well as group members from the 2013 tour. Here's a photo of the Mennonite Church songbook used at Weierhof, a mimeographed copy in German. In the Weierhof Cemetery, we found several familiar names. This photo shows an old Golly Krabel headstone. These more recent headstones show some other familiar Mound Ridge names, Golly, Gable. Other familiar names in the Palatinate were Schrag and Roth. We turn now to Alsace, the second migration route from Switzerland. Most of the Mennonite migrations to the Alsace region from Switzerland occurred after those to the Palatinate. The Alsace is located in the extreme northeast corner of France. Here the Rhine River forms the border with Germany, Allemagne in French, as you can see up there. This geographic map shows several French villages, Colmar and Montbeliard, and where several Mennonites migrated, many Mennonites migrated to, and several Swiss cities, Basel, Bern, Zurich, Thun, where Mennonites came from. Our 2013 group stayed at Hotel de la Couronne in Ricqueville, a primary tourism area in Alsace. Many little hotels don't have elevators, and you may have to carry your own bags up several flights of stairs. A highlight of our 2013 tour was socializing and eating the foods of the region. Colmar on the Rhine River was another popular tourist area in Alsace. This photo shows the famous Strasbourg Christmas mark. An important city for the European Union, Strasbourg attracts people from all over Europe. The distances between Mennonite areas in France are manageable. It's easy to travel among cities by train, by rental car, or by hiring a driver. Oh, sorry. Well, I'll just go ahead. In this final section, we turn to Coutances, France, another city near Montbeliard, a major center for Mennonites in France during the 17th and 18th century. In 2013, our group visited the Graber homestead in Coutances. The old Graber homestead is no longer a working farm, but in its heyday, it was known for a prize-winning breed of cattle, the Simmental, perfected by Joseph Graber, the family patriarch. Terry Huckle, who lives on the Graber homestead, is a great source for finding Mennonite roots. He continues the genealogical research of his father, focusing on the Swiss Volhynian families, Grabers, Goerings, and Kaufmanns. The following photos show the Graber ancestral wall, the family genealogical research library, and some family historical documents. I felt a particular connection to this area because many ancestors on my dad's side of the family are Grabers and Goerings. These are my parental grandparents, Jacob M. Goering and Anna Graber Goering, who wrote and published several genealogies on the Goering and Graber and other family lines. I want to end my presentation today with these entries for Moses Goering, or Mosse Gerig, in the Montbeliard Mennonite Church Register. These entries from 1766, 10 years before America declared independence from Britain, represent the first written record of our Swiss Volhynian Goering family line. In other words, Mosse Goering is the earliest documented common ancestor of all of us Moundridge Goerings. Now, Jerry Juhnke will talk about his experiences in the Montbeliard area.
Thank you, Dave. One of the earliest mass migrations out of Switzerland for our ancestors was to Montbeliard, France. At Montbeliard, our Swiss ancestors started a Mennonite church around the year 700. 1700, excuse me. We weren't that early, yeah. You might be both surprised and pleased to know that the same church is still in existence today. The church is now called the Église Évangélique Mennonite La Prairie. The church has a membership of about 230, an average attendance of about 300. The Montbeliard Mennonite Church is the largest of only 32 Mennonite churches in France. The total number of Mennonites in France is about 2,050. The church has a website that you can visit. On the website, 2 Grabers and 1 Kaufmann are listed as part of the church staff. The church is now very active with a significant amount of youth attendance. The congregation is well aware of the various Swiss Volhynian Mennonite settlements in the United States, and they welcome visitors. Our Swiss ancestors did not travel far to reach Montbeliard. The French city is only 8 miles from the Swiss border and about 45 miles to the north and east of Bern, Switzerland. The city of Basel, which is on the northeast corner of Switzerland, is about 36 miles straight to the east of Montbeliard. In the early 1700s, the population of Montbeliard hovered around 3,000 people, or about 50% larger than the city of Moundridge. Today, the population is about 25,000, or a little under twice the size of McPherson. The Montbeliard Church is important in our history because our early ancestor records and Mennonite histories that we have today comes from a church register kept by this church from about 1750 to 1958. The Mennonite congregation of Montbeliard, which in French is pronounced Montbeliard, had its beginnings shortly after the Almond Schism. The Almond Schism, which is also referred to as the Almond-Rees controversy, created the Amish Mennonites who followed Jacob Almond. Today there are no Amish in Europe. The Almond-Rees controversy is important because the Swiss Valenian Mennonites that came from Montbeliard, France community were part of the Amish community. As a result, a significant percentage of the Swiss Valenian Mennonites have some Amish ancestors. The Swiss Mennonites that moved to Montbeliard included the surnames of Flukinger, which became Flickner and Flickinger, Graber, Kaufmann, and Stuckey, among others. It should also be noted that in our early history, proselytizing was forbidden by law. As a result, until we get to Russia, very few, if any, new members came into the Mennonite communities by the conversion of their non-Mennonite neighbors. In 2007, while my wife and I were vacationing in Germany, Switzerland, and France, we made an unannounced visit at the Montbeliard Church. We were met at the door by one of the church secretaries who immediately communicated that she did not speak much English and proceeded to close the door. I held up a sheet of various traditional Swiss Valenian Mennonite names on it. She looked at the paper, immediately invited us in, and said in fairly good English, "I'll get you what you want." I had no idea what that was. But in a short period of time, she came back waving the old 1750 church book, as shown here in this video. That's the original. She laid it on the table and said, "Here are your ancestors." In about 1750, the church built its first large church building. We were able to see the building. It was being used for grain storage and very much in a state of deterioration. I've since heard that the old building was since torn down and due to a significant amount of disrepair. Later that afternoon, the church secretary took us to the church cemetery, which was located a fair distance away from the church. At the cemetery, we saw many names that we associate with the Swiss Valenian Mennonites today, such as Graber, Stuckey, and Kaufmann. Around the cemetery was a large wall, which she said, depending upon your perspective, the wall was either designed to keep the Mennonites in or the Catholics out. The cemetery was still in use. Several cows were grazing nearby outside the cemetery walls. Many of the cows had cowbells on, which made quite a racket. We made a second visit to the church in 2013, and at that time attended a church service. Their services are very much like the typical church in the United States that might have a praise band. Their religious beliefs are very much what we would consider as traditional Mennonite beliefs. If you wish to attend the church, you may want to contact the church through their website. They welcome visitors and may be able to plan some activities for you to do during your stay. You may want to also visit various sites that are important to the Swiss Protestant Reformation, including Zurich, Bern, and the villages in the Emmental Valley. check with your travel agent for possible Mennonite or Protestant tours in the area as well. And now Wayne Goering will talk a bit about Poland.
We traveled to Poland during the 1995 Ancestral Village Tour of Poland and Ukraine. It was organized by Harley Stuckey and Ozzie Goering. As a timeline marker, the Berlin Wall came down on 9 November 1989, so Poland had recently escaped from the Soviet bloc at the time of our visit. Ursuline is still an existing village in eastern Poland. Our ancestors mostly arrived in Ursuline-Mickelsdorf area in 1795. They were not there long before departing to Russian Ukraine, a group to Edwardsdorf in 1807, and a group to Hordish in 1837. We flew into Warsaw and had a city tour. The Warsaw Castle, originally built by a Polish king, was completely destroyed in World War II and since rebuilt. This is a view of the Vistula River and bridge in Warsaw. From Warsaw, we drove to Krakow. Topography went from very flat to rolling hills, many orchards and goose farms. Horse-pulled wagons were a common sight. We visited the Wielicka salt mine near Krakow that's been mined since the 13th century. About 150 miles of tunnels, 9 different levels, 1,000 feet down at the deepest tunnel. Through the ages, miners have carved grottos and many intricate salt carvings. This is an example of the salt carving. It's probably about 10 by 20 feet. This is a World Heritage Site and there is no current salt production. There are only tourist dollars produced now. This is the old Krakow Market Square. During our free time, we ate our way around the square. Kielbasa, pierogi, and poppy seed roll. We visited the World War II Nazi concentration camp, Auschwitz-Birkenau, outside of Krakow. This was a very interesting visit, but it was not a lot of fun, mostly draining and very sobering. This is the Auschwitz entrance sign, "Work sets you free." After Krakow, we were off to the Ursuline-Mickelsdorf area. This is a stork nest on the road to Ursuline, a pretty common sight. This is our group photo as we posed in Ursuline. In the lower left corner, a stranger joined us for the photo. For all I know, this may be the first photo bomber. Mickelsdorf is now believed to be Michelo. Descendants of Ursuline Mickelsdorf ancestor pose under the Ursuline road sign. We visited the Skyrinsky farm and were rewarded with pears from their orchard. I believe the Skyrinsky family was one of Ozzie Goering's heifer project contacts. Skyrinsky's son was building a new concrete block house, and he would put another row or two of blocks on as time and funds would allow. He said this had been in progress for a few years. In the Mickelsdorf area, Harley said, "This is holy ground." Here we are, we're walking the Mickelsdorf Road. Sheep were plentiful in the area. Here is number 20 on the Mickelsdorf Road. This is typical construction with dovetailed rough planks. We visited with a local family in the Mickelsdorf area. Again, you can see the dovetail plank construction. We did some graveyard exploring in the Mickelsdorf area, but did not find any Swiss Valhenian names. Leaving the Mickelsdorf area, we drove to Reimenau, a small town in southeast Poland. It was potato harvest time, and we saw several harvests going on. The harvesting always seemed to be a family affair. A horse-drawn digger was followed by a family retrieving the potatoes and putting them into a wagon. In the Reimenau area, we visited 2 farms to see the Simmental cows provided by Ozzie Goering's heifer project. It was very uplifting to see the evident pride and enthusiasm of the farmers who received a heifer. Heifer project recipients agreed to pass along a heifer born on their farm. That's a nice pay-it-forward way to do it. These cute farmers' kids were glad for our modest gifts of some coins, some gum, pens, and crayons. From the last farm, we went with the area heifer project director to his church in the village of Bukowsko for lunch. After lunch, on to Ukraine. After 2 hours of getting through the border, our first impression was a very beautiful country, but much poorer than Poland in 1995. Well, on to Ukraine with Kathy Goering.
Now, about Volhynia, Ukraine. We hear about Ukraine in the news and identify with these cousins, whether we know that or not, whether they know us or not. My group on the 2013 Shmeka trip stopped in the big city of Kyiv. Impressive city. Won't look that way anymore, I bet. The gold-topped massive cathedrals looks like Russia. Gold onion-shaped towers. There they are. Then our big bus took us to the country, to the 4 little Mennonite villages in Volhynia in the north part of Ukraine. So on the map, maybe some of you took a map along to see, we identify the 4 villages, Sohoris, Horodish, Waldheim, and Kotosuvka, in an area 240 miles west to east by 120 miles north to south, about 1/2 the size of the state of Kansas. In the 1800s, Mennonites lived primarily in villages, with about 30 to 40 families in each village, usually with one large orchard and garden shared by all, and a schoolhouse and a church. Names here: Varan, Graber, Kaufman, Flickinger, Preheim, Goering, Schrag, Albrecht, Stuckey, Schwartz, Rees, Senner, Strauss, Krabel. You can identify these villages on your map. First, see Sohoris on the left side, close to Edwardsdorf, then Horodish, where wooded land had to be cleared to be made productive, then Waldheim, where the congregation owned the land for the first time. Those 3 villages, many from there went to Dakota in 1874. Then on the right over there is Kotosuvka, for people lived there just 13 years. Many Kansans came from there. Leaders were Jacob Stuckey, Jacob D. Goering, and Johann Goering. On our Shmeka-sponsored trip in 2013, leader Gary Waltner showed us the area of these villages. What did we find? Almost nothing. I was disappointed to not see villages I had envisioned in an area so important to me. My grandfather, C.J. Goering, was born in Kotosuvka, and I was totally obsessed with seeing it. We know that Ukraine has been the breadbasket of Europe, so we can understand the lives of our ancestors as mostly farmers. Today, I want to share my primary remembrances of Volhynia province in Ukraine that shows the picture of humble and modest and real agricultural life. Beautiful country, reminded me of Kansas in terrain and farm life. Doesn't it look like Boundary Edge area or South Dakota landscape? Ancestors must have observed that here. land in strips, crops of wheat or buckwheat or rye or sunflowers. I was sad to see harvesting with old combines. After the Russian collective farmers left with their better machinery, leaving few implements and only small plots of land, their livelihood was in jeopardy. I thought our Kansas and South Dakota farmers could help them to flourish. The people are resilient, living frugally from garden, fruit trees, farm crops, and hard work. Some people, doesn't look like the trucks and combine wheat trucks that we have in line, but this is what it looked like when we saw them. The people were friendly, even sharing their apples with us. See their busy front yards with their wash on the line. Helen Nachtigall was invited into a home and visited there with a babushka, a granny. We watched as one drew water from a water well. Have you ever done that? You could use a glass of water right now, couldn't you? But put that pail down in the water, and I don't know if everybody just took a turn when they got thirsty or how that was, but this young man was showing us how it was done, and you could hear the plunk of the bucket going down into the water. He was quite pleased of his work, and I think everybody was pleased that they got some result. Some of our people, don't spill. Some of our people tested the sesame seed candies in the little village store. There wasn't much in the town, but they did have this little store, and we got to go there. Some visited the nice, not so nice outhouse. We passed the ever-present horses and wagons. Look at the unique shape of those wagons. We saw a lot of them that were that shape. These horses and wagons pulled hay. You want to go help them unload? Or even two wagons? Even the women work in the field. Do you remember seeing haystacks like that? No, not on your farm? Our Ukrainian guide took us to overgrown cemeteries, but we could not find names that we knew on the gravestones. Some told us that Mennonites had lived there. Leslie petted this man's horse, and then she got a ride. But she was so uncomfortable because she couldn't communicate with him. We saw blue and yellow houses everywhere, the colors of Ukraine. Houses often white or yellow, churches often blue. Just like in Poland, the storks come back here, and we had our cameras going when we saw those because it was so unique. By some villages, we saw symbols that indicated this was a Christian Orthodox city. We came to Herodish by way of country roads with many potholes. A man told us that a colony had been there and a church. He suggested taking a shortcut home through the narrow path. And what an adventure. Our 53-passenger bus nearly got stuck, and how could we even turn around? I thought we might be there forever. We got back late to our hotel and were served pierogi. And it was so good. I love being in Volhynia. It was a dream come true to have a glimpse of the life of my ancestors, to stand on the soil where they had been, and to understand a bit of their hard work ethics and values they brought to the United States. During our travels, my daughter Leslie wrote prayers and thoughts she felt from God. I will share with you as we end this seminar. You now understand a little more of how your ancestors endured through many difficulties. You are blessed by the faithfulness of your forefathers. Learn from them. and I will bless your descendants for your faithfulness. I know some of you in the room were on this 2013 trip with us, and some of you have been overseas at other times probably. We might have just a few questions before we leave, if you don't melt. If anybody has something they want to know about.
It reminds me of the temperature on the bus.
Can you help to differentiate the Amish, like who was Amish, who was not Amish? The Amish group, I guess you said, is more so the Montbeliard group, but the Rheinland-Pfalz group was not so much Amish, is that right? And which names are associated with the Rheinland-Pfalz?
Probably Jerry could tell you more. I just know that I remember my mom saying, I would ask her, were my ancestors Amish? And she would say, oh, I don't think so. And I found out later they were. And it was okay. It was okay. But the rice split, I can't speak to that very specifically. So ask Jerry.
If they came from Montbeliard, they were of Amish background. Now, there were probably some Grabers and Kaufmans and Stookies that didn't go through Montbeliard and were not Amish. So you need to find out whether your ancestors went through Montbeliard. The early to mid 1800s, when everybody went to the Ukraine area, the Amish mixed in with the other Mennonites, and after a while they just gave up their Amish ways. That's what happened.
I think that's right.
We don't have any specific event or timeline that said that, oh well, we no longer consider ourselves Amish.
If you look at that chart that was outside there, you could pick it up if you didn't pick it up. It does show, that you can go this way, and then this way, and then this way, or some of your people went this way and this way. And Edwardsdorf was kind of a place where many of them came together. So that was kind of a melting pot kind of a place. And then they came to the U.S. Kodasuvka and these three other villages came at 1874, kind of in the same time frame, and settled like around us. And later, you know what? We learned there were a lot of other Mennonites who came to the U.S. too, and a lot of Catholics and a lot of other people who came too. And so as we kind of widen ourselves out a little bit, we learn more about other groups who have very similar stories and are also very wonderful people. So thank you for joining us today, and I think there's going to be some treats out there until the next seminar starts at 10:30.
Are there any other trips planned by chance?
I don't think we have, Schmecka doesn't have any trips planned. That was a major thing. That was 2013, it was a long time ago. But look at what happened since. So you wonder where could we go? Yeah. Now, there is a 500-year trip being planned in next year, 2025. There's a 500-year trip, and it'll go to Switzerland. And it'll go to Switzerland, but I'm not sure where else. But yeah, and there will be some more information out about that.